The jade dagger hidden beneath Empress Wu's silk pillow wasn't meant for self-defense, but for eliminating the seventh concubine who had discovered the secret chambers beneath the Forbidden City, where over 2,000 women had vanished without explanation during the first decade of Emperor Kangshi's reign. What Western historians have deliberately omitted from their sanitized accounts is that the Imperial Harem system functioned as history's most sophisticated concentration camp, where systematic extermination was disguised as cultural tradition, and where the romantic mythology of concubine life served as propaganda to conceal crimes against humanity that would shock modern sensibilities with their calculated brutality and industrial efficiency. The spring of 1673 marked the 10th anniversary of what palace records euphemistically called the Golden Selection, when 3,000 young women entered the vermilion gates of the Forbidden City, believing they were ascending to lives of luxury and imperial favor. The mathematical reality reveals a different story entirely, with mortality rates exceeding 90% within the first 5 years, and survival depending not on beauty or intelligence, but on willingness to participate in the systematic destruction of fellow prisoners through methods that combined psychological warfare with physical torture in ways that wouldn't be formally documented until 20th century studies of totalitarian regimes. Each woman represented not just an individual tragedy, but a calculated weapon against the family and community from which she came, creating networks of controlled terror that extended imperial power into every village and household across the vast Chinese territories. If you believe you understand the true nature of historical oppression, prepare to confront evidence that will fundamentally alter your perception of how civilizations maintain control through the systematic dehumanization of their most vulnerable populations. Because what we're about to explore represents one of history's most successfully concealed genocides, disguised as cultural sophistication. The selection process began years before girls actually reached the palace, with imperial agents conducting psychological profiles of entire families to identify which candidates would prove most useful for different aspects of the control system. These weren't beauty contests, but sophisticated recruitment operations designed to capture individuals with specific personality traits that could be weaponized against other prisoners. Officials looked for combinations of intelligence and desperation that indicated potential for both strategic thinking and moral flexibility, creating a population of victims who could be transformed into enforcers of their own oppression through carefully calibrated programs of conditioning and reward. The famous ranking system from Changzai to Imperial noble consort masked a complex hierarchy of psychological manipulation where advancement required demonstrating increasing levels of cruelty toward other inmates. New arrivals discovered that survival depended on abandoning every moral principle they had been taught, with daily requirements that included reporting on fellow concubines' private conversations, participating in punishment ceremonies against randomly selected victims, and competing in increasingly degrading performances designed to break down individual identity while providing entertainment for palace officials who documented the psychological effects for later application throughout the empire. The architectural design of the concubine quarters revealed the true purpose of the harem as a sophisticated prison system, where every element served multiple functions related to surveillance, control, and psychological conditioning. The famous beauty of Imperial gardens concealed observation points where guards monitored every interaction, while the elaborate decoration included hidden mechanisms for releasing poisonous gases, controlling temperature and lighting to maximize psychological pressure, and recording conversations through ingenious acoustic systems that channeled sound to central monitoring locations where trained analysts interpreted emotional states and predicted rebellious behavior. Emperor Kangxi personally supervised the development of conditioning techniques that combined elements of what would later be recognized as classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and systematic desensitization to create human beings capable of inflicting extraordinary cruelty, while maintaining emotional detachment and aesthetic appreciation for their victims' suffering. These methods involved carefully orchestrated reward and punishment schedules designed to create learned helplessness, intermittent reinforcement patterns that maximized emotional dependency, and systematic exposure to escalating levels of violence that gradually normalized behaviors that would have been unthinkable to psychologically healthy individuals. The medical experiments conducted within the harem pushed beyond simple torture into systematic research designed to understand the limits of human psychological and physical endurance, while developing techniques that could be applied to controlling larger populations throughout the empire. Palace physicians tested various combinations of drugs, surgical procedures, and environmental manipulations on concubines, documenting the results in detailed treatises that were later distributed to provincial administrators dealing with rebellious ethnic minorities and conquered territories requiring pacification through terror rather than military force. The breeding programs within the palace served purposes far more sinister than producing imperial heirs, functioning as genetic experiments designed to create populations with specific characteristics suited for different roles within the imperial machine. Children born to concubines were immediately classified according to detailed criteria that determined their future functions, with most facing systematic conditioning programs that would transform them into specialized instruments of state control. Boys who survived the initial selection process were trained as psychological warfare specialists, while girls underwent preparation for roles as infiltrators, assassins, or breeding stock for future generations of imperial servants. The seasonal eliminations that occurred within the harem weren't random violence, but carefully planned operations designed to maintain optimal psychological pressure among survivors, while testing new methods of execution that could be applied to larger populations during times of social unrest. These mass killings were disguised as religious ceremonies, natural disasters, or disease outbreaks, but palace records reveal meticulous planning that included detailed psychological profiles of victims, sophisticated timing designed to maximize terror among witnesses, and careful documentation of which methods proved most effective at breaking remaining prisoners' resistance to authority. The intelligence network that operated through the harem extended throughout the entire empire, with surviving concubines' family members serving as unwilling agents who provided information about local conditions in exchange for fabricated reports about their daughters' welfare within the palace. This created a surveillance system that reached into every community across China, allowing imperial authorities to identify and eliminate potential threats decades before they could develop into organized resistance. The systematic nature of This network involved millions of people and represented one of history's most comprehensive examples of population control through the strategic exploitation of family bonds and emotional manipulation. The winter of 1681 brought what historians have euphemistically termed the palace renovation, when over 1,500 concubines were eliminated in elaborate ceremonies designed to demonstrate imperial power, while providing practical training for officials who would later implement similar programs in Tibet, Mongolia, and other conquered territories where traditional methods of military control had proven insufficient for maintaining long-term stability. The methods developed during these operations included sophisticated techniques for breaking community solidarity, creating artificial divisions among ethnic groups, and maintaining populations in states of chronic terror that made organized rebellion virtually impossible. The economic aspects of the harem system reveal its function as a massive human trafficking operation that generated enormous profits through the systematic exploitation of female labor while serving as a demonstration of imperial wealth that intimidated foreign diplomats and potential rivals. Concubines were forced to produce luxury goods under horrific conditions, with their work generating revenue that funded military campaigns and palace construction projects while providing practical experience in managing large populations of enslaved workers who could be systematically eliminated and replaced as economic conditions demanded. The technological innovations developed within the palace for monitoring and controlling human behavior were later exported throughout the imperial administration, creating comprehensive systems of population control that relied on psychological manipulation rather than simple physical force. These techniques included sophisticated methods for identifying natural leaders within communities, creating artificial conflicts that prevented organized resistance, and maintaining populations in states of dependency that made rebellion seem not just impossible but unthinkable to people who had been systematically conditioned to view imperial authority as natural and inevitable.